Hey guys, Nutnfancy here with another handgun review. Man, this is fun doing these, and I'm doing the very best I can to get you information for your purchasing decision. You law enforcement types, civilian sheepdogs, I appreciate you all. Here comes one that I've had a lot of requests for, and it is a very cool gun. It's a Walther PPS 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Cool gun, and I haven't shot it yet, so I'll just tell you that right now. It is a relatively new gun. But I will talk to my initial impressions of the gun, and that's about all I can do. But in doing so, maybe it will help you just know what the gun's about and maybe a few characteristics that you may or may not like about the gun. As usual, I'll weigh in with my opinions, which are probably not worth very much, but that might help you as well. Hey, as we go, I'm going to roll in the KelTec PF9 semi-automatic pistol. I have several videos out on this, and I have reviewed it thoroughly. I do that because it's interesting to compare and contrast the two guns. I consider them to be pretty much in the same category. They're single stack 9mm pistols. Therefore, it might behoove us just to see what the different features are. We could also compare it against maybe a Glock 26, Glock 19, and that would be good, but I don't have those handy right now. So let's get going. Lots to talk about, as there always is when we talk about any type of handgun. I'm going to go down my talking points like I normally do. You TMPers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's start off, as I normally do, with POU. That's a Nutnfancy term meaning philosophy of use. How do I envision this particular gun, the Walther PPS, to be used? Well, primarily in a defensive role. No kidding. That probably does not come as a surprise. This is a gun you would defend your life with, maybe the lives of your family as well. Some homeowners could purchase it as their one and only handgun. It is comfortable enough, ergonomic enough, and I would suspect easy enough to shoot where you could do that. I will not call it a subcompact gun. I think it's a little bit large for that, kind of trending towards a Glock 19 size a little bit, and I do not consider the Glock 19 to be compact either. You got to go along the lines of Glock 26, maybe like this KelTec PF9 Kahr, PM9, PM40 for me to consider it a full-size caliber but compact, subcompact gun. So POU, would I consider this an officer's backup gun? I think it's a little bit too big. I will talk about some very good points about the PPS and the ergonomic stage that will lend itself to that, but I do think overall the form factor is a little bit large for that. That's just me. So it could be a primary handgun, you bet, and a concealed carry gun as well. Again, when we talk to ergonomics, it has some really good features to it. Size and weight. The size, let's bring the PF9 in here. The size is larger than the PF9, as you can see. It's hard to stack these. I don't want to scratch it. It's a brand new gun. I want to take very good care of it. But the grip is both wider and longer than the KelTec PF9. Their barrel length is longer, the slide is higher. The thicknesses of the guns are very similar. I'm not going to measure them, but almost identical. So they're both flat and very easy to carry in that regard. The weight is not super light, around 22 ounces for the PPS, and that is just a little bit more weight than a Glock 26. But the Glock 26 has an advantage over this gun in that it carries substantially more rounds in the magazine. I'll talk to that here in a second. The sight radius, though, on this PPS is really long, actually, for what it is. Longer than the PF9. I hope I didn't interchange those terms there. Forgive me if I did. Sight radius, again, in a subcompact 9mm pistol. Not a huge thing, but I will take it if I can get it. If we go with a longer sight radius, it's going to be easier to hit targets at range. That is, if we are indeed using the sights. Probably more often than not, what you're going to be doing is point shooting in a defensive situation. You're not going to have time to line up your sights. So in some ways, with this POU type gun, it's a little superfluous, but I still like it if I can get it. And the PPS against the PF9 wins. Longer sight radius. It would probably win against the Glock 26 as well. And actually, I kind of think of the PPS as a size-wise as between a Glock 26 and a Glock 19. It's not really as small as a Glock 26. It's definitely thinner, but it is definitely not as big as a Glock 19, at least this initial impression that I'm doing right here. Let's talk about firepower. This is kind of a downside to the PPS if you ask me, because for a gun that is this large, it only holds 7 rounds in the magazine plus 1, that's a total of 8. So what we've done, or what Walther has done, is saying we really want a thin firearm, and to do it we're going to sacrifice our round count to do it. And if you recall, that is exactly the same firepower in the KelTec PF9, which I've reviewed. But the PF9 is slimmer, not slimmer, but smaller in every dimension. That's going to make it easier to carry than, yes, even the very slim PPS. So firepower is not great. And then if you want to relate that to weight, again, remember the Glock 26 is, if you do a +2 base plate, it's 12 + 1 for a total of 13 rounds. Compared to 8. So, I like more for my weight carried. That being said, it is very slender, and that's going to make it easier to carry in that regard than the Glock series. Accuracy, can't speak to it, haven't shot it, I haven't read too much about it. I suspect, though, it'll be adequately accurate, probably 2-inch groups at 15 yards. I'm just guessing now. Let's move on. Ergonomics. The ergonomics are a little bit different, and there's certain things you're going to have to get used to if you get the Walther PPS. One is it's that Change the World magazine release that both Walther and H&K love to push on us, and actually this one is not that bad. I criticize H&K USP mag release that's right here in the same position in the lower corner of the trigger guard, as opposed to a standard place like where KelTec puts theirs. Let me talk about the bad part first. The bad part when we have a trigger guard like that is that, a magazine release like that, is that it's different. If we are shooting other guns that have that standard way of releasing the magazine, under stress we may tend to do that. Go there and say, oh, where's my mag release? Oh, I'm shooting a Walther. You probably won't even think of that under the right amount of stress. That's a disadvantage. One of the good sides of the Walther PPS, the way they've executed this, though, is look how long the magazine release runs along the trigger guard. That is huge in my opinion, because that makes it much easier to access perhaps with your index finger. You come over here, yeah, you're shooting, but you can easily train to, guess what, drop the magazine with your index finger, which I do also employ with H&K series pistols. I use my index finger as well sometimes. Or you can use your thumb. Either way, since they've extended it along that trigger guard here, that magazine release, it actually functions quite well. But it's something you're going to have to train with. And it is actually, in my opinion, a much better design than the USP version, which is very small and it rests just solely on the corner of the trigger guard there. Other ergonomics are similar to other guns we've seen, very Glock-like in fact. Here's your slide lock, slide release right here. And I would say it's actually a little bit more ergonomic than the tiny and almost useless Glock slide release that as it comes from the factory, unless you're talking a Glock 34, Glock 35 that has the extended. But easier to release because there's a ridge on there that works nicely. Here's your takedown lever, and guess what? Very Glock-like. In fact, pretty much identical. Sorry the battery died. I'll join the clips talking about the ergonomics on the Walther PPS. Has interchangeable backstraps back here, which is a nice feature. If I can get that, I'll take it, because perhaps your hand is very small, very large, and those interchangeable backstraps will be a feature you'll appreciate. That gets to kind of the width of the grip. It's very slender, like I've talked to already. It's a single stack magazine. It should be slender, but it seems a little bit wide to me, and my hands, again, are kind of on the large size, but I'm talking about this dimension right here. Maybe I would need to experiment with the other backstraps and see if I could adjust the width for me to something different. But that's just an initial impression. Again, I'd really need to shoot it to know for sure. Has a variety of raised dots and some cosmetic-only stippling going around the circumference of the grip, none of which, in my opinion, really add to the grip of the gun. Unlike, again, the KelTec PF9, which I talked about, it has those raised blocks that actually has some relatively sharp edges on them. And I'm not talking like sharp hurts you sharp, but something that gives you traction. Those are useful. These raised dots, not so much. But that's, again, just my initial impression of it. How are the sights on the PPS? Decent. They're raised, the 3-dot variety. They come to presentation quickly, and they're very SIG-like in my opinion. I like them. Decent sights. But I'll tell you this, I'm jumping ahead of my talking points just a little bit. When you get a new gun like this, and because it's very limited in sales compared to something bigger like a Glock, maybe a Springfield XD, your sight options to swap them out are going to be very limited. And that is unless this gun just takes off and goes crazy in sales, which we'll have to see. I just don't know. Ending the ergonomics talking point, overall, a very nice feel, very slim in hand. It's going to be very slim to carry. You won't be bumping into it a lot. I like it. By the way, nice grasping grooves on the slide there. Decent. None on the forward portion, and I don't know if you need that in this type of gun. How's the simplicity of this gun? Let's talk about field strip, because since it is so easy, for a change I will field strip it. We'll do that by taking the magazine out, safe direction, racking the slide, pulling the trigger, and again, guys say, well, it's striker fire pistol, you have to pull the trigger to field strip it. Again, I don't see that as being a huge disadvantage if you have common sense and gun safety. And then, just like a Glock, you'll pull that takedown release down, and off comes the slide. That's it. So it's going to be very comparable to Glock in the ease of field strip. Double captive recoil spring. Hey, and while we field strip it, check this out. This is kind of a cool thing. Look at how long the slide rails are, and if I'm not mistaken, made out of steel. So that's a nice advantage of the Walther PPS. Actually, this one's full length all the way down the side. Awesome. So getting back to the accuracy talking point, knowing what I know now, looking at that, I would expect this gun to be actually pretty darn accurate, truth be told. I'm not going to take the barrel or the recoil spring off. To put it back on, just slide it on, just like the Glock. Function check. You're done. That's about as easy as it comes. By the way, another thing about the ergonomics, this magazine is, in my opinion, and this is just my initial impression, by the way, is this magazine visually is real easy to get backwards. In other words, one time I actually tried it. Looking at this, I'm just looking at the extension. It's hard to tell which direction it goes. So that's something, again, that as you use the gun and become more familiar with it, probably will not be a factor. Back to simplicity, showed you the field strip. It's easy, very Glock-like, on par with Glock if you were to ask me. And the controls are Glock-like. We don't have any nonsense safety levers, safety catches out here, because we have our safety mechanism built right into the trigger, like I mentioned previously. That makes the Walther PPS, in my opinion, a very easy gun to use, very revolver-like. How about versatility and accessories? Well, dudes, I got to be honest with you. Like I said when I was telling you about the sights, you're going to have a very limited number of accessories when you go with a newer gun like this, like the Walther PPS. It's not a Glock. You just don't have, hundreds of holster selections out there, dozens of sight options, trigger modifications, different things you can do. It does have a standard accessory rail. So that will be nice for the attachment of a light laser combo if you so desire. So that's an accessory you can go with, but overall you're going to be limited. Versatility, this kind of gets back to POU. How could you employ the gun in different ways? Well, like I said, it's large enough where it can be a primary handgun for a household, and yet it's slim enough where it could be a concealed carry option for the same people, if that's what you want. So it actually, in that term, is fairly versatile. And I kind of said the same thing about the KelTec PF9, truth be told. How about value? Well, it's going to take a hit here, because the Walther PPS is not an inexpensive gun. It's going to be around $600, a little bit more, a little bit less. Excuse me. You're going to be paying for that Walther name, truth be told. And when you pay for it, you're just going to have to determine whether it's worth it to you. Remember, the KelTec PF9, which is the same category of pistol, same number of rounds, very slender, has a double action only trigger, not a striker fired like the Walther PPS. But you know what? Very similar, under $300. So this gun is twice the price of the KelTec PF9. You need to determine if that's worth it to you. Second kind of cool, you just dig having a Walther, you dig the PPS, you like how slender it is, you love the sights, you like the ergos on it, the way it looks, then guess what? The money's probably well spent. You'll have to determine that. That'll take us to durability and reliability. Well, again, I don't have trigger time on it, and so I don't really have a lot of data to speak to the Walther PPS right now. Down the road, maybe I'll make an addendum video if I run into some verified sources. I am very picky about my sources that I use for my data, and if I find out something, I'll let you know. I will suspect, though, that Walther, being what it is, and that is an extremely high-quality gun manufacturer, has this design relatively squared away. I expect it to be durable, accurate, and reliable, going along with the previously established Walther reputation, specifically in the P99 series. So we'll check in with that later, and that'll get to track record. Again, new gun, new design, who knows. What really helps a handgun take off is if it is adopted by police agencies. And I've said that many times before. If a police agency adopts it and uses it on any level, whether it's maybe a detective's weapon, an officer's gun, or even makes it a viable and available option to the officers, then the gun can really take off and prove itself. And that's kind of what we need to happen with this gun. So that's it. Pistol review on the Walther PPS. It's initial impressions only. Overall, really favorable, except it is a little bit heavier than some other options that have the same amount of firepower. So you'll have to consider that. And it is kind of on the expensive side. But as far as ergonomics, I suspect accuracy goes, and the simplicity, it's very Glock-like, and it is a very viable option to maybe a Glock or some other offerings you're looking at. This is Nutnfancy signing off. Thanks a lot for watching and the good ratings. It keeps me trucking along. Walther PPS out.